Hello and welcome to the You're Great podcast with your host, Unique. So, this is a podcast I actually recorded right after the fires with my friend and colleague, Luis Mojica. And it's actually a topic that I've wanted to discuss for a long time, mostly because everybody knows me as the Bean Girl, the Bean Protocol Girl. And something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is that I don't want the Bean Protocol to be my identity, and it's not. For me, the Bean Protocol is how I healed both my relationship to food, my relationship with myself, my autoimmune condition Crohn's, and endometriosis in the end. I love it, but I don't want to be confined to it as my identity. I find that is very limiting to have food ideologies. I would much rather be known for a person dedicated to her best health. And my work is to get people to eat more balanced. But more importantly, to honor their body, not their cravings necessarily, because I feel like cravings are often disconnected from what we actually need. A lot of times they are a signpost for curiosity. Is it a taste memory? Is it something else? Vegan, carnivore, paleo. I get it. These are things that started off as tools of liberation and then ultimately become confinement. Because if a person is known long enough as a vegan, if they change directions for their health, to honor their health, they are suddenly an outcast because their food ideology became their identity. And how do you grow and change if you're supposed to be stuck in this place forever, known as? It's really hard to go against the grain. It is really hard to lose friends and have people judge you and throw rocks at you for growing and changing. I think ultimately in the end, that is what Luis's story tells us, is that he started to notice that the way he was eating wasn't serving his best health and that he needed to get curious with it. So he did. And we hear the fallout of losing this identity. So I think food is functional. How it became identities, I think a lot of times people mistaken tools for identities. A lot of times these more strict protocols are tools to heal, but shouldn't take the place of eating well for your body, no matter what that contains. For some people, going vegan can help them learn how to have a healthier relationship with their body. For some people, it's another disordered way of relating, as well with going carnivore or paleo. You know, these can become disordered ways of relating if we stop listening to our body in lieu of the ideology that we have subscribed to. So I am softening my grip of being a bean protocol person. I am a person who eats well for my health. I am a person who puts my health first. I am a person that when I go on vacation or out to a restaurant, I look at a menu via the eyes of someone who is interested in taking care of their health. I don't go on vacation looking for a free-for-all. I don't go anywhere for a free-for-all. I go everywhere with my health. I pack it with me everywhere I go. I love this conversation, and I've been waiting to put it out, not because I was waiting, but because I really wanted to talk about this food identity crisis that I feel like people are going through. And obviously, there are many people who choose things based on personal belief systems, right? And let's just say vegan, because that's the conversation we have today, where they cannot fathom eating an animal. And I get that. But I do feel like the lines should be drawn if we are sacrificing our health for our ideology, because life on planet Earth is no fun without great health. So my father taught me to honor the animals that were giving me life and to be appreciative and thankful for them. And I have lived a life with that in mind. I don't sit down to a meal disconnected. I sit down connected. to the work I had to put in to create this meal, both financially and physically, to the animals and plants that are giving their lives to me, for me, in support of my health. And I am grateful and deeply thankful because I know the difference between living here in a physical body that is declined and a body that is thriving. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Luis. I hope you find it thoughtful and thought-provoking. And I hope it allows you to soften your grip. It's about taking care of yourself and holding the health of your human animal body in the highest regard. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the podcast. I knew you as a really rooted vegan in spiritual practice, and somewhere along the way, I saw you eating like fish or something. And I was like, wait, how did I miss this? I remember somebody, I think it was Mojica, just like, oh yeah, he's experimenting with protein. So I just wanted to really, first of all, hear your transition into becoming a vegan and then the exploration out. Talk to me.
I'm so grateful we're doing this because I haven't had a long form public conversation about this since I publicly came out of the closet as as not being a vegan anymore. So it all started when I was, gosh, I was in 10th grade. I was taking an animal science class, and the animal science class took us to a factory farm for poultry, and it was so traumatic. It smelled horrible. The chickens were really ill looking. It was just like gross and sad, and it felt just off. It just felt off. And I couldn't stomach animal protein. I just couldn't stomach it. It was like empathically, it was too painful to even consider eating that. So I quit and went vegan initially. Actually, I went vegetarian initially. It lasted for maybe 3 months because I knew nothing about nutrition. I was in 10th grade. I was eating potato chips because they were vegetarian. And so it was that kind of like, it wasn't even potato chips and hummus. It was like potato chips and cheese whiz. So it was like really just very low quality vegetarianism. I got very sick because of it. And my mom said, listen, you have to eat protein until you can figure out a healthy way to do this. And so I started eating meat again and just fell back into that lifestyle, not thinking much about it. And then when I was in 11th grade, 12th grade, just maybe a year or so later, I had this sudden urge again to be vegetarian. And this time I did a bunch of studying and got into essentially whole food vegetarianism, learning a lot about that, reversed a bunch of illnesses I had. And then because of the reversal of those illnesses, I thought, well, this is the way, this is the way to go. And so then I went vegan.
And so what did that look like? Like what did stage, like it was potatoes and cheese whiz, potato chips and cheese. And then what was the next iteration look like on your plate?
Yeah, I remember very vaguely. Very clearly. The next iteration was salad there was this like tomato vinaigrette dressing I found, which was the healthiest dressing I'd ever found in my life. So it was salad with this tomato vinaigrette. It was flaxseed oil on salads. It was this hemp bread I would buy, this organic hemp bread with like almond butter instead of peanut butter, which was revolutionary. Just for context, I grew up in a lower middle class family in like what we call the middle south of central Pennsylvania. And so there's no culture of vegetarianism, veganism, health food. It doesn't exist there. So this was like really stepping out of a box for me. Like I was already the black sheep of my family. So yeah, these really kind of simple health foods I could find at these old school health food stores. Tofu, lots of vegetables, lots of steamed vegetables, lots of plain vegetables, salads, fruits, that kind of thing.
And how old were you at this point?
Moving into vegan, yeah.
And from junk food vegan to getting all of the nutrients.
A lot of nutrients. And I got really, really big into supplements. I was working at a health food store part-time as I was going to college for psychology. The health food store is right across from the college. And this was also what created my foray into nutrition because as I was working with people in the health food store and doing independent research, I was seeing their mental illnesses just go away within weeks. I was like, this is weird. What? I'm studying for like 5-6 years to have people on lifelong medications for their mental illnesses when really it's the gut microbiome. So that actually caused me to quit my major in psychology and study nutrition instead. But while I was there, I got really into supplementations, especially whole food supplements like barley grass and fibers and different powders, which transformed my gut and my skin started clearing up, my asthma went away, my cholesterol, like all these things I thought I was plagued with were just gone within a matter of months.
And did you get your nutrition degree at the same college you were studying psychology?
So I started independently studying nutrition, and then I ended up studying with a school. It was a 2-year program, and it was to get a certificate I opted for instead of a license because I didn't want to be beholden to the licensing bureaucracy of New York State.
Yeah, been there. When you start looking at all the paths towards helping oneself and others, you realize that I even looked at becoming a dietitian and I was just like,
Hmm. Me too.
okay,
And at
so
the time, I was taking care of my grandmother who was in a hospital and my other grandmother who was in a nursing home. And so I was really up close and personal with the dietitians in those realms. And I was just so opposed to the way they were trained. And I thought, I'm not wasting my time and money to do this.
so you were helping people, you were seeing the transformation of eating a vegetarian and doing supplements and all of that stuff. And it was at that point, did you go into more veganism and was that still more vegetarian and you were having like a lacto vegetarian?
Hmm. So I had realized that I had a dairy issue, and so I got off dairy completely, and the only thing left in my diet was 1 or 2 hard-boiled eggs with a meal, and everything else was vegan. And then I realized I could just relinquish the eggs and be vegan. And that idea of being pure really, I'm a recovering Catholic. So the idea of being pure was like really seductive. And I was dating someone at the time who was vegan, and it was kind of just that way of, well, I could go even deeper into this. So when I was 19 and I was in college, I was actually studying photography while I was independently doing nutrition work. I started to consider, let me try veganism and see how that works. And I loved it. I initially felt really alive. I loved that all my nutrients are coming from plants. I loved that I wasn't depending on animal lives. I loved that I was out of the factory farm model. So I thought there was only this one way to do it. And then I pretty much remained vegan. There was like a couple moments where I had to eat what was in front of me because I was so poor. I had no food. And it was like, I have to eat what this person made. But for the most part, I was strict vegan and then got into macrobiotics and it got even deeper. And my healing, though, also got deeper. So, simultaneously, while I'm going deeper into different vegan diets, I'm getting more whole food in those diets. I'm getting much more conscious and educated in nutrition. I'm studying, I'm doing so much work in the nutrition field. And now I'm making like kind of the perfect vegan diet for myself 100% whole food, 100% home cooked, like really alive. And I was thriving.
How did you feel about these labels? Like, how did you metabolize that? And what role did that play in all of it for you?
Veganism definitely. So I had always been a fringe person, like on the sidelines of culture and society for most of my life for a lot of different reasons. And veganism was just another club that was on the fringe. So I liked that club. I liked fitting into that club. I liked easily making friends like that. If you told someone you were vegan and it was like, that's it, we're best friends for life. So there's like this instant access to people's hearts and lives, and you just have this family very quickly. I never ever shamed people for their decisions, and I never got into animal activism. I did that literally for 1 week in college, and I was so appalled by what I did and what other people were doing. It just felt like I didn't want to create shame. It didn't make sense for me. I just loved it so much, but I also enjoyed the attention and the immediate connections I made from being vegan. Macrobiotic, that was amazing. Talk about being even more fringe. It was just this incredible world I discovered. I loved the seaweed. I loved the taste of the earth that came through the foods. Loved how simple it was. There was such a meditation of preparing the grains and talk about bean-based diet. That's when I really was eating beans nearly 3 times a day. So by the time I found you and Karen, I was like, wow, I've been prepped for this for almost a decade. This is like doable.
It's like, wait, omnivore? Here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But in the city, I was lucky enough to live in New York City right on the tail end of the macrobiotic craze, which hit New York City in the 70s. And so there were all these little macrobiotic eateries all across Brooklyn and Manhattan, especially the Lower East Side, East Village area where I lived and worked. And so when I lived there, these places were still there. So it was so fun to like go out and for $8 get like an amazing macrobiotic dinner. And so I had kind of that little part of the culture that was still alive while I was there as well. And it normalized it for me and made it kind of like a modern experience.
That's really cool. So I remember listening to a podcast episode with Karen, and you were saying if somebody doesn't want to eat animals as a spiritual practice, what could one do? It was like a real spiritual practice. And it landed for me, like as truth for you. I was like,
Mhm.
well, he really does not want to eat eggs. And Karen was like, well, what do you think about eggs? And you were like,
See, I grew up on extremely processed food, so I was the opposite of you. I grew up at McDonald's several times a week.
were you as happy as they were in the commercials?
I thought I was.
Okay.
If you ask me when I was 10, I would say nothing's wrong. That's
McDonald's.
right. So my body was formed on a processed diet. I mean, almost entirely. My mother cooked meals every night. And I would say definitely compared to where we lived and the people around us, her meals were incredible in terms of quality. But our food was extremely processed. I mean, most stuff is out of the bag. I only ate maybe one vegetable with dinner, which at least there was that. No, barely no fresh fruits, mostly like fruit punches, like gusher, chewable candies, like all these things that were just red food coloring. I mean, you name it, like the worst of the worst. That's what made it my entire childhood diet. So me going into vegetarianism like pulled me into the produce aisle in a way I never had been before. So I was suddenly getting this influx of fresh vegetables and then macrobiotics. That's where it became even more spiritual because macrobiotics have this way of seeing food as an entity. So it's not just like food, it's a being. You cut the carrots a certain way to not disturb the chi of how the energy moves through the carrot when it's growing in the ground. It's this incredible kind of religion in a way. And that really worked for me, that sense of ritual and reverence with food, like properties of food, almost like character and personality. There's an animism to macrobiotics, and that's what really pulled me in. But to answer your question, from age 16 until 20, I don't even know, maybe 26, 27, 28, a good 10, 12 years, veganism really raised me to think that eating animals would equal having cancer. So I had this really specific idea in my mind that animals would lead to a really horrible thing happening in my body, in my stomach, in the world. And it seemed like a bad deal for the animals, seemed like a bad deal for the earth, a bad deal for my body. So it just was like toxic. I really saw it as toxic.
You know what's interesting is because I work with so many people and I'll get a fair amount of vegans who come and they're not well. They're women and they're not thriving, their hormones are not thriving. And I'll be like, well, are you open to eggs? Oh, I feel so much better. And I'm like, well, are you open to some ground chicken? No, 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 no ground chicken. Okay. How about some fish? Yeah, I'm open to fish. Feeling so much better. My energy is better. I'm sleeping better. And I said, oh, that's great. And they're like, but I can't. And I was like, well, why? My friends. I won't have friends anymore.
Yep.
Vegans are so judgmental. Like when somebody starts to eat meat, it's
Oh, yeah.
blasphemy.
Yeah.
It's like
You're
a witch hunt.
excommunicated. It's incredible. That's exactly how I felt when I started having my cravings for animal protein. I remember what would stop me in my tracks, like, no one can know I'm doing this. I have to like go to the grocery store like in a hood and like cloaked and like buy my stuff and run out. Like I was so terrified the vegans in the community would see me eating or buying eggs.
Yeah. And she said, I eat my meat before I go to dinner with my friends.
I was closeted for about 2 years while I was doing this, and I didn't want anyone to know.
Yeah, because it's and I just want to kind of say that what I said to her, as I said, if your friends can accept you as you are they actually friends?
Hmm.
Are these actual friends? Or is it just you belong to the same club? And as soon as you eat meat, you're kicked out of a club. And then that's not friendship. Like that's something else.
Yeah. Well, that's what started interesting me because as I was studying psychology more again, and I was getting to somatic psychology and trauma healing and understanding relationships and personalities, I started seeing that so many of my clients and a lot of the friends and just people I knew and admired that were like, well, we would call it militant vegans. We'd say there's people on a vegan diet and there's a militant vegan. They're different. The militant vegan like wholly identifies with the lifestyle and really sees eating eggs, chicken, cheese, any animal product as like a human rights violation. Like they see it as like murder. So it's not just like you committed a crime as far as they're concerned. Like you're not a good person anymore. So it's very deep and very rooted, and I understand it. And I also am fascinated by the amount of trauma that takes place, especially childhood developmental trauma, with a lot of these people I've met who have that kind of militant veganism. And this is their way of renegotiating harm. They've had a lot of harm inflicted on them. And so at some point in their life, they realized animals have never hurt me. This is how I'm going to protect the most, vulnerable and in a way protect themselves. And so I understand the psychology and the emotions behind a lot of it. But yeah, breaking that bond was really scary.
I bet. So how did you go about it? So you were 2 years incognito, and what was that like for you?
Well, first, I'll just say, because I was so deep in macrobiotics, and I just thought I found the best diet in the world. And what I've come to learn now is I'm so into trusting the body and following the body and how it shifts with age and how it shifts with hormones and traumatic experiences and stress, geographic location. Like there's so many shifts. So I've come from that very narrow way of thinking of like, I found the perfect diet. This is the only one for everybody and me. And I've learned that there's so many options. But what really did it for me was I was living in this little cottage and I was working a lot as my business really started taking off. And I was just feeling so much brain fog and fatigue and an inability to repair after any kind of workout or exercise. And I was gaining weight for the first time since I was a kid. I lost a bunch of weight when I was a kid. And so these kind of strange symptoms were coming back and I was feeling ill. And every time I saw an image of eggs or fish or even like beef or cheese, I was like salivating. And so the first thing I did was go to the store and get all the vegan forms of it. I was like, nope, I'm gonna beat this thing. Because I was a whole food vegan for so long that I hadn't eaten like vegan burgers and cheese. So I thought, okay, well, I'm just gonna go to the processed side a little bit, just to like deal with these cravings. And at first I was like, I did it. I figured it out. This is all I needed. And I was like obsessed with Beyond Burger and Beyond Sausage and like VO Life cheese and all these really processed foods for a good 3 months because it was emotionally satisfying the craving and kind of tricking my animal body into, okay, you think you're getting these certain nutrients because it tastes and feels like this thing. And so I was satisfied at first, but then I was getting even more sick because of the processed, nature of these foods. So I had emotional satisfaction. My symptoms got worse, and then I was getting other symptoms on top of that. And I knew this at this point. So I already was doing this practice, I was doing this work in the world, but I was still just kind of following my body's weird signals and trying to figure this out. And then when I started, I decided, okay, I'm going to get some eggs. I'm going to get some local fish. It's always eggs and fish with us vegans. I don't know what it is. But it's like the pipeline to get to, getting more animal protein.
How long ago was that? How long ago did fish and eggs kind of make their way in?
2020, I believe 2021. It was in the fall of 2021, I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that the interviews Lacey did, I feel like really introduced Karen to a lot of people.
And that's what did it for me. I remember I was painting my house. I lived in this little cottage, and I was painting the walls during the pandemic. And a client had sent me the interview Lacey did with Karen, and then I found the interview with you and Lacey, and that's what brought me to both of you. Because when you heard that interview with Karen, I think that was in 2020 with me. And that's when I was asking that question because I was still vegan. So I did the Bean Protocol vegan for a while, actually. And then I was like, my body needs something else. I'm not getting it. And so it was 2021. I think it was around May 2021, where I was just needing these foods so badly. And I went to the store. I got these local, I got all the highest quality stuff, like local free range eggs, locally caught smoked trout. And I said, I'm going to have the eggs for breakfast. I'm going to have the trout with my lunch. And I was doing the Bean Protocol. So I was just adding these things to that. I'm not kidding when I said maybe in 3 hours, I felt tremendously different. I had so much energy. It felt like the way I say it to this day is it felt like my brain was dehydrated. And as I was eating these animal proteins and the fats, especially, like I got this little local raw cheese, and I was just getting these like animal fats. It was like my brain was just soaking up these nutrients, and I felt so nourished and like juicy in this way I hadn't for so long. I felt like dry and kind of crunchy, for a while. And now I felt like flexible and juicy and voluptuous internally.
Like a woman going through menopause.
That's right. That's how my brain felt.
One of my early memories of macrobiotic was my mom and dad, because they were macrobiotic for many years when macrobiotic first came on the scene. But they had a spiritual practice that if somebody offered them something, they would take it. And how they ended up no longer being macrobiotic after something like 5 years of being macrobiotic is they were in Hawaii hitchhiking, and this Hawaiian family picked them up. And the Hawaiian family kept looking in the rearview mirror. They were in the back of the truck. And they're like, you look really hungry. And they're like, yes, we are hungry. They're like, we're going to get you food. And they stopped and they got them burgers. And because of my spiritual practice of not saying no to whatever came my way, it's like, you just say yes, you lean in, and they all had these burgers. And my mom and dad were like, we were all so quiet, eating and feeling this life rush in that we had not felt for such a long time. And to the extent, like, I didn't really know what it meant then when they were telling me these stories of like my dad was, and my mom was like, oh, and your dad's libido was in the garbage. Like, that was the last day that they were vegan or macrobiotic, was that burger kind of was the catalyst.
Yeah, I really get that. I
Yeah.
remember that, and it's so interesting you say about life, because this is another thing I had to uncouple. You know, being vegan for so long, I thought life was only from plant foods because I saw animal foods as death. So I saw it as like a rotten, dead carcass, and eating it was going to kill you. So it was this real idea how against my nature somehow this would be. And interestingly enough, around this time, I was working with a Taino elder, they're the indigenous Puerto Rican people, named Irka Mateo. And she was doing work to help kind of connect me to some of my ancestral roots. It was part of my family's Puerto Rican. And what she said to me in the session was, you need to eat fish from the rivers and fish from the sea. You need like the yin and the yang, like the masculine and feminine energies of these different fish. And it was when I was craving. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. But what's also interesting to me is it's still a movement, but it was a very big Instagram movement of decolonization. It was kind of like everywhere. And I stopped using that term because it became so politicized in a way that I don't like. But the initial idea of it was simply not shutting down your body anymore and relating to your body, and then being able to relate to the land and people around you in a much more compatible, kinder, balanced way. And I remember thinking, well, isn't it more decolonial that I eat fish from the river than have Beyond Burgers that are, from like soy in the Amazon and packaged and shipped over in plastic? And I love those moments, actually. I live for them. It was kind of like all these light bulbs going off. And I noticed, oh, eating this way is actually more sustainable, and it's closer to where I live, and it's within my ecosystem, and it funds local farmers. And it just started shifting my whole heart and mind toward this. And then I got to the place. So this is the interesting part. I was writing my first iteration of this book I've almost finished on now at this time with a vegan publisher. And I'm in this chapter. If I just eat my eggs, and I'm in this chapter writing about the trauma you get from eating animals that have been killed. And I'm realizing I am fawning massively right now. I am completely compartmentalizing my actual lived experience right now, the healing I'm getting from these foods, the spiritual awakening I'm getting from these foods, so I can keep this book deal. And that was the big moment for me when I still told the publisher, I'm not vegan anymore. I'm eating eggs and fish. They instantly canceled the book deal, ripped up the contract. And that was just kind of propelled me to just tell everybody. I have one vegan friend that's like, I love you for you. I don't care what you're eating. Even though she's like pretty militant in her veganism. No one else, people won't even look at me if they see me in a store.
It's interesting to speak the language of trauma. It takes a lot of capacity to realize that two things can be true.
Hmm.
When we look for these black or white ways of thinking, righteous or not righteous, good or bad. If you're vegan, you're good. And if you're an omnivore, you're bad, right? And so I think that to actually be able to see life in two things can be true, which is, yes, vegan is right for you, and no, it is not right for me. And that's okay. And it's not about good or bad, but that takes a lot of capacity to hold varying truths. And I see you do it all the time and take a lot of flack for it. It's like, two things can always be true. And
Yeah.
it's a real trauma response to think otherwise, of like my clients who are secretly eating protein and because they want to maintain these friendships that are important to them. It's under false pretense or a lack of, it's disingenuous, yet it works for them because they get to take care of themselves and still maintain these friendships. But it's that's an interesting way to maintain friendships. And I find I have a real kindness towards my way or the highway, but I do see it as a trauma response.
Yeah, me too. And I'm currently no longer willing to have those relationships. I'm willing to have contradictions as a person. I'm willing to have friends that are totally opposing my lifestyle or belief system. I'm willing to have all that. But I can't have friends where I have to compartmentalize anything I believe in or I'm doing in my life to somehow earn the friendship. To me, that's a very insecure attachment. There's nothing secure about that at all because it's riding on all these false narratives and conditions. So it felt so, it catapulted me into this work I do as well around fawning, because to stop fawning and just be real and be hated, yeah, to this day, the most viral, vile post I have when it comes to people commenting me angrily is my vegan one, where I said that I could not believe it. I thought I was going to have 8 people and maybe 2 of them were going to be frustrated. It was like 580 comments. And the most foul accusations, you can't even imagine it, Unique. It's amazing. But just sitting back and watching that really was like, oh, I lost like, a couple thousand followers. They were really angry with me and didn't trust me anymore as a trauma therapist because if I ate meat, I don't care about traumatized beings, the animals. Of course, I understood all this because I was deep in that world, but it was fascinating to have the capacity to just disappoint everybody and lose friendships and viewers and such.
To truly be yourself. I remember coming into your groups and always having to say, if you eat meat, and I honor people who can thrive and not eat meat. Beautiful. I'm really happy for you. But if your body is unwell and you are sacrificing it for an ideology, there's a fucking problem there.
Yep.
There's
That's
a
exactly what I came to.
yeah.
Because when I was doing the somatic meditations around this whole thing, it was like a good year or so of me just grieving my own identity. And I was doing these practices, and my body kept saying, Luis, I'm an animal too. Like you keep saying you care about animals. I am literally an animal you're caring for, and I need eggs. And I was like, I wouldn't make my cat vegan. Why am I doing this to my body? And I kind of emerged with this spiritual somatic experience of I'm vegan, my body's not. My body wants meat. I'm going to start feeding it at once.
Yeah, and it's an act of love. And I
It
tell
is.
clients that who come to me and go, I'm vegan, I don't want to eat meat unique, but I still want to work with you and do this medicinally. Cool. And I just say to them, if at some point your health doesn't turn the corner, it's not because you need another supplement. It's because your body is asking for something else. And in loving kindness, you may want to listen, whether you listen with me or someone else, to get to the place that you can be open, that your body needs something that your belief system doesn't allow.
Mm.
Is a major disconnect. And
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
love ourselves truly as we are. What's interesting to me is I work with a lot of couples who are vegan, and the guy will be thriving and the woman is just shrinking and getting small.
Mhm.
Crazy. It's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Well, I'm fascinated too, just when I think of our bodies changing, especially female bodies, I'm thinking about the hormonal changes that happen in menopause and how it's even harder to get these incomplete proteins to transform and transfer in the body. Especially, and this was, I think, part of my issue, I was getting sick, is when you're vegan, your your amino acids are attached primarily to carbohydrate sources. So you have to up your intake of carbohydrates to get the amount of amino acids you need to build muscle repair and such. So you're having a high carb experience or a low carb, highly processed experience with lots of like protein powders, fake meats, these kind of things. And that's what wasn't working for my body. And I had the same experience as, when I was a vegan nutritionist. I would have a lot of women I worked with. And when they would get into their late 40s, 50s, they all started craving eggs and fish, and they would start eating eggs and fish and they would start thriving, hormonally and physically and emotionally and sexually and everything. So there's something that's happening there with those hormonal changes where it's harder to break down those carbohydrate sources and get those create a complete protein out of incomplete amino acids. And so when I see them eat the complete protein, just like I did, it's like my body can just use it. It doesn't have to do any extra work. And it feels so immediate
Yeah,
and supportive.
I guess that's why they call it efficient, because you
Yeah.
have efficient protein, amino acid entering your body. And, it's the difference between somebody handing you a turkey sandwich and you having to chase down the turkey, kill it, string it up, like the
Yeah.
process of getting enough nutrients from plants alone is like this whole process.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's a lot of carbohydrates. Quite honestly, and I know this is going to be a controversial thing to say, but I think there's a lot of eating disorders in the vegan vegetarian, where I see a lot of women doing it for weight. And then they kind of like make it this idea of like, oh, eating meat is going to make me gain weight, or
Mhm.
it's interesting to see where things kind of collide,
Mhm.
and just shift to food.
Well, when you said earlier about any ideology that makes your body suffer, whenever I'm seeing that, there's some disorder within that, because when you start suffering, that's your body's signal of saying, I need this to change. I need some different food. I need to leave my husband, like whatever the situation is. And when you're bypassing that for something else, I mean, that's a disordered relationship to self in general.
Yeah, which all eating disorders are first and foremost. I always think to myself, when I had one in my 20s, it wasn't about food. It was about me being disordered with myself.
That's
and
right.
Wanting to fit in when I wasn't meant to. That wasn't my road in life, was to fit in. And everything I was trying to do was to fit in, you know? And it was like my body was,
Yeah.
yeah, 10 out.
But I had binge eating disorder for maybe 15, maybe 20 years. Like, I can't remember the exact amount of years, but it was a long time. And I noticed when I started coming out of the vegan diet, I have zero binging episodes anymore. I used to have maybe like a couple a year, and that felt like recovery to me. I don't binge at all anymore. And so there's something interesting even about that, because for me, again, just for me personally, there was that little undertone to my veganism of perfection and purity. And that's also what pushed my binging and purging disorder, was this extreme amount of food because of all the trauma I was holding and anxiety, and it would quell it temporarily. And then disgust with my body and wanting to clean it out and detox and like purge and throw up, take a bunch of supplements, 3 days of fasting, all these huge extremes, which wrecked my gut. So to be on this place of kind of, oh, let's get rid of purity and bring in nourishment and balance, totally different experience. And I'm so much more balanced in my life, my body, everything from that.
Oh, yeah. And a lot beyond the emotional components of alignment that I hear you talking about, when we are grounded from the inside out, we can begin to access those emotional elements. Whereas before, because the food and the emotions are so closely tied, it's hard to kind of pull those two pieces apart. It's like, what comes first, the emotion or the food? And that momentary comfort and grounding that leads to that next spiral, because the blood sugar comes out of balance again and you're off on this roller coaster ride. What I found with the bean protocol, it was my first time feeling that anchor within of like steady blood sugar. And from that place, you have access to emotion. And quite honestly, I think it's too much for some people when they do anchor into the protocol. I don't know if you see that, but it's
Oh
like,
yeah,
things
a lot.
quiet.
But the somatic work's so brilliant, because to be able to do the somatic work with yourself of feeling this space for the first time, and even emotions that have been repressed to start coming forward, like that has nothing to do, it's not the diet creating the symptoms. It's these things that have been sitting there waiting for their moment to emerge, right? Because they're not stuffing them down anymore.
We see.
But even, yeah, exactly, to be seen. And even when you say that balance piece and less carbohydrates, it's so nice to look at my plate and notice the only massive carbs I'm getting in my diet are these beans for the most part. And which are, I personally barely see beans as carbohydrate. I see them more as like fiber and protein. But the amount of soluble fibers, you don't even have the blood glucose spike you would have with, like, let's say, white or brown rice. And so it's so nice to know, oh, most of my nutrients on this plate don't even have a carb attached to them. And then there's this really beautiful, complex carb I'm getting. And it just feels so settling for my body.
Somebody did ask me that as a question recently, and they were like, is legume a carb or a protein? And I was like, can't it be both?
That's right. That's the real answer. It's everything, baby. It's everything you want it to be. That's what a bean is. Anything, it's a fruit, it's a bean, it's a fiber, it's whatever you want it to be.
Well, it's like the world of nutrition, it wants to create these black or white structures
Yes.
of like, it's a this. And so if you're paleo, it's a carb. And if you're, something else, if you're vegan, it's a protein. And it's like, well, actually, it's a complex carb and a protein, incomplete protein, but it's all of those things. And it comes back to, again, two things can be true. It can be a carb.
That's right.
So
Makes me like beans even more as he's talking. Oh, no wonder I like you.
actually, it's funny. The more beans become mainstream, the more I'm like, the ride of the weirdo is over.
Are they becoming mainstream, would you say? Or are they getting bean per day in the sun?
No mainstream. Beans are going mainstream.
I just think it's so funny.
It was celery, lens celery,
It's
and
definitely kale and celery.
now it's going to be beans.
Oh, well, you got to ride the wave. You've been preaching the bean gospel for long before anyone knew it.
Also, how many vegans I get that don't eat beans, by the way? And I'm like,
Yep. I never understood that, because to me, I grew up with the old school, not grew up, but I was young going into it, well, if you're a vegan, you have to have your complete protein of rice and beans. So for me, at least one meal was always rice and beans.
So do you feel the best you've ever felt, or is it just at this time in your life, this feels like the right thing?
I would truly say, as of this time in my life, I feel the best I've ever felt. Because when I look back on when I was macrobiotic and I felt alive, I was still very dysregulated. I still had lots of glucose spikes. I had a lot of adrenaline. I was a runner, so I was like running a lot. I was trying to be as thin as possible. I was like modeling. This whole thing just wasn't, my intentions weren't, the best for my body, put it that way. So now I feel the most settled in myself, and I can work out and recover, and I have so much endurance, and just my vitality, my energy is so high, and my skin's great. I just feel like I'm in a place where my body's really flourishing, and I'm older than I was. It's amazing to be older than you were when you thought you were thriving, and to be thriving. So right now I'm doing the right thing. That's what I know. I don't know what will happen in the future, but now this is it for me.
I love it. And I love every decade of life. I do believe that there are these reckonings that we have. And I'm in the middle of my own, going into menopause at any time. And I have to say that 12 years on protocol, it's still the right thing for me. It's evolved with my evolution. So
It's nice to hear you say that, because it's 5 years for me since I did the Bean Protocol, and it's evolved. I did it as a vegan, I did it as a ovo, I did it with fish. Now I'm like omnivore. It's
just keeping it balanced, keeping it present. It does show a lot of healing, I think, to be present and to keep transitioning with time as your truth shifts and changes, and to come out of your veganism and to be honest is so bold and confident in yourself. And I just applaud it. When I saw it, my head almost fell off. Go.
And then I took you out to a vegan restaurant.
I know. And I was like, where's my salmon?
There's always next time. There's always the future.
I'll be vegan for a day for you, Luis.
Okay, there we go.
I thank you. Thank you for riding the tech problem wave, and for being here, and for sharing your truth, and for being strong enough to show yourself in every iteration. I am inspired by you, and I adore you.
Oh, thank you. I feel exactly the same.
And that is not fawning.
No, it's not fawning because it's real.
Yeah. Cool.
And we say this to each other off camera too. So it's like, I'm not just saying this because I'm being recorded.
Yeah, we do. We have text voicemails of like, you're awesome. I dig you, man. All right. Have a lovely afternoon, and I will see you on your podcast.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Luis, and I am a bean person for life. Let's just get that straight. I just don't want to be confined. I want to be free, and I want the choice of how I care for my body to be mine. It is empowered, and I don't need a label to know that I'm taking care of my body. The Bean Protocol was a tool for me, and it is my practice, and it is how I give back to my community and to those seeking to create balance in their body and wellness and tools for wellness. It is absolutely life-changing, but I never want someone to override what their body needs. I want that to be a conversation. And I want this ultimately just to be known as an omnivore plan for healing, which is what my next book will be about, coming out later this year or early in 2026. It's called The Bean Protocol. I know, I'm not doing myself any favors, right? I'm going to be the Bean Protocol girl for life, but it's basically an omnivore plan for healing. And so much of healing isn't just about what we remove, it's about what we put in. It takes effort and consistency and real grit to change the course of our health and health outcomes. And I'm here to tell you that you can do it. All right. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, night, or wherever you are in this beautiful world.